After slavery, the black community was doing better. We were going up, up, up.
That was Candace Owens arguing that, hey, it is socialism that has led to the terrible economic situation for people of color. And the debate that she had was with Cornel West, as you might have seen in that video. Laura Ingraham hosted this debate segment. And Candace Owens said a lot of really dumb things throughout.
Anna Kasparian details a contentious discussion between, despite ignoring historical injustice and systematic racism in America, Candace Owens and Cornel West Owen contend that socialism and welfare programs have harmed the black community. Her support for nationalism has also been called into question by a number of historical truths.
100 years after slavery, the black community was doing better. We were going up, up, up. Then suddenly they socialized our community via welfare policies, and the black community started going down, down, down. And you're sitting here supporting a candidate that is advocating for making that on a larger scale. He's saying, we're not just going to do it to the black community, we're going to do it to every community in America. Well, you know his policies do not work. You know that socialism has led to more deaths than anything else in the last 100 years.
So the talking point, I know. So the talking point that Candace Owens has been pushing, she's no longer with Turning Point USA. But when she was at Turning Point USA, she was paid to say that it is not systemic racism that leads to, the disparity in wealth and income between, white individuals and black individuals in America. It's because of socialist policies. It's because of welfare that the black community is being held down. Now, first of all, that makes no sense. We know, and we're gonna debunk that in just a second. But think about who funds Turning Point USA. They're the very corporate donors that corrupt our politicians to push for deregulation, to push for tax cuts. So look, they're very savvy. It is a multi-pronged approach. It doesn't just stop at corrupting politicians. They attempt to corrupt education. They attempt to, corrupt young minds, which is what's happening with Turning Point USA. And it's terrible.
In her most recent remarks, Candace Owens asserts that socialism and aid programs are to blame for the downfall of the black community. She asserts that until government intervention reversed such progress, black Americans were making progress after enslavement. Additionally, Owens accuses Cornel West of endorsing policies that she believes could replicate similar harm on a national level. Anna Kasparian responds by denouncing Owens a confusing democratic socialism with totalitarian regimes like MAS and asserting that Social Security and Medicaid programs are intended to assist rather than harm populations that are already at risk.
People like Candace Owens lead pathetic lives because they're paid to sell their own identity out. And so that's just a reality of it, because none of the things that she says is true. And so I guess they get paid handsomely. I don't know how they sleep at night. So let's begin to correct the things that she said. First of all, she, on two different occasions there, supported white nationalism, which has murdered black people in this country for hundreds of years. It was white supremacy, the idea of that drove slavery, Jim Crow, the Klan, etc. Now you have a African-American woman paid to defend white nationalism. That is disgusting, okay? And then in the earlier clip, she talked about, African Americans were doing fine for 100 years after slavery until welfare came to help them. Really, they were doing fine? How about the lynchings? How about the Klan? How about the bombings of the churches where little girls were massacred? You think they were doing fine? How about when they didn't allow African Americans to vote, even though they had the right to vote? That's what the 1964 Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act were all about. So the horrible years where they're being oppressed against the law and against the Constitution, you call the good years. Mm-hmm. And then when someone actually tries to help the African American community, you say, that's when things started to go down, down, down. I mean, it's so perverse. And by the way,
she didn't even mention Jim Crow laws, right?
Of course.
Yeah, she didn't mention any of the stuff that actually matters.
I don't know if she's just pathetically stupid and doesn't know any history at all, or she knows the history of how brutal supremacy has been to African Americans and thinks, I don't care at all. Where's my money? The only color I see is green. You want me to sell out black people and lie over and over and over again about how wonderful white people were to us as they were lynching us in the South? Great, where's my check? None of it is backed by facts. I mean, listen to what she said about the Nazis. She said it would have been fine if they just stayed in Germany. Really? If they just murdered all the Jews and the Poles and the minorities and the LGBT and the Roma and all those people inside Germany, that would have been fine? That would have been fine. Do you know what Hitler did to African-American athletes? Of course you don't, because you're a moron that doesn't know a goddamn thing, okay? And so now she says, oh, well, look, if they just made the trains run on time inside Germany, everything would have been hunky-dory. It's just absolutely grotesque.
And look, the heart of the conversation or the debate was about socialism and how destructive it is. So she attempted to fearmonger about socialism. And look, Cornel West, you should watch the full debate because he did such a fantastic job rebutting her and giving real evidence and logic to her arguments. But one thing that really stood out to me was, okay, so you don't like welfare programs, you don't like any type of government assistance, then maybe you should speak out against Donald Trump wanting to give farmers $15 billion in subsidies because of the damage he's done as a result of this trade war to these farmers. By the way, the majority of this money, I would argue, doesn't even go to the small town farmers who are the most affected. Usually it goes to some of these massive corporate farms. But anyway, my point is, what do you think about that? How come there's never any anger about that?
In response to Candace Owens' critical assessment, Kasparian and Ben Wagan make compelling case for democratic socialism. They point out that, contrary to Owens' assertions, real-world achievements like Social Security and Medicare benefit millions of Americans and have widespread bipartisan support. They also highlight the contradictions in conservative rhetoric by pointing out that, while Donald Trump and other conservative leaders have backed corporate socialism by giving large subsidies and tax breaks to the wealthy, democratic socialism seeks to improve society as a whole through inclusive and egalitarian policies. Kasparian and Wiegand challenged Owens' romanticized vision of black success following enslavement by exposing harsh historical facts like Jim Crow laws, voter suppression, and institutional racism. They contend that only federal programs like the Civil Rights Act produce meaningful advancements, defying the notion that all government action is harmful. Owens' controversial remarks regarding nationalism and Hitler's deeds are also criticized for displaying a risky historical misinterpretation.
What is corporate socialism, what Anna's referring to? Bank bailouts, tax subsidies. You know that the oil companies are still getting billions of dollars in subsidies. For what? For what? They're the most profitable companies in the world. Why should they be getting subsidies? That is socialism for the rich. And Candace Owens doesn't mind any of that. She's like, did the check clear? Then I love corporate socialism. That's how she makes a living. That's what she's paid. She's paid to tell these horrible lies to deceive people because of corporate socialism. Ironically, she's also the benefactor of that. She doesn't do anything productive for her life. Okay, she just takes checks and then says, what do you need me to say? I'm here for you. And so she lives like a socialist every day, Cenk. Okay, but it's a corporate socialist.
And since she has such strong words against socialism and these, government safety net programs, I just want to note that a Harvard study done in 2009 indicated that 45,000 Americans die every single year because of our terrible capitalistic healthcare system. We also have this huge issue where, capitalism has led to private prisons where now there's a profit motive to imprison as many people as humanly possible and to pass these insane tough on crime laws. So has that had any impact on the black community in America? Because I believe it has, but you don't want to talk about that. That's the type of capitalism you love, right?
So look, it's not to say that you can't ever be a black conservative. If you care about balancing budgets, if you care about, hey, did the SNAP program go too far and create some degree of dependency, although it did save and help millions of kids get food assistance, et cetera, so they don't starve to death. Well, we can have an intelligent conversation about that. But an intelligent conversation is not Candace Owens telling you that the period of lynchings in America was wonderful for African Americans and that if the Germans had just murdered Jews inside of Germany, that everything would have been great. No, she is the definition.
The reaction of Cornel West to Candace in stark contrast to her impassioned address. Owens' remarks were a masterful demonstration of reasoned logic and evidence-based analysis. Although Uyghur and Anna Kasparian do not discuss West's contributions in any detail, they do value her capacity to refute Owens' claims with historical context and lucid logic. In response to Owens' scare tactics regarding socialism, West offered a fresh perspective on democratic socialism as a means of reducing inequality rather than imposing tyranny. He also emphasized the importance of social programs like Medicare and Social Security, which have been crucial for millions of Americans, particularly in developing countries. His arguments made clear the sharp distinctions between Owens' simplistic talking points and a well-reasoned policy critique. Wager, on the other hand, harshly and passionately attacks Owens' opinions, calling them pathetically foolish, absurd, and repulsive. Their criticism goes beyond her personal beliefs and centers on her readiness to put her financial gain ahead of the truth or the welfare of the community. They paint Owens as a sellout who makes money by spreading information that furthers conservative and corporate agendas. Kasparian and Wager emphasize the broader ramifications of Owens' words, contending that her misinterpretation of history and policy influences public opinion and undermines the advancement and efforts of oppressed people for their own gain. Their impassioned speech highlights the gravity of these alleged betrayals and portrays Owens as a contentious individual whose actions demand careful thought.